Worldwide, the plant-based food business is absolutely exploding. According to Allied Market Research, a $14.2 billion industry in 2018. And then other estimates say that by the year 2026, it could be worth 26 billion. A lot of growth there. And it doesn't take more than a trip to the store to see all of these incredible options that are available. But those options, they're not always the healthiest. And so that's why I'm so excited to have my guest on today. He is the co-founder and CEO. There he is. That's my guy. The co-founder and CEO of Cool Beans, Tyler Mayoras. Thank you so very much for being here, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I love your show, and it's great to be a member again.
It's so great to have you here because as we were talking before we hit this record button, I do love the business. And so watching these market trends from somebody who believes so much in a plant-based lifestyle, I feel like is just absolutely fantastic. And then here you are, you recognize the same thing, but then you're using your own experience and really putting things into practice to create these awesome products. Cool Beans that we're going to talk about here in just a second onto store shelves. So really, let's just start off with a thank you and let you know that there's a debt of gratitude there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're really excited about how they've been received in the market. So that's great to hear.
Before we talk about the origin of Cool Beans, I want to get your story. I'm imagining that like the majority of us, you weren't always eating a plant-based diet.
No, absolutely not. I've been in private equity for probably 20 years and spent the first 10 years really focused on general, a lot of different industries. And then the second 10 years, I focused on food. But through that food journey, I did a lot of research. And over time, as I was doing that research, my own diet started to move more and more towards sustainability. And in 2016, I was at a trade conference and heard about the animal impact or the climate impact of animal agriculture. And they were saying numbers of 15%, and I didn't believe it, frankly. I just thought there's no way that could be. And went back to my office and crunched the numbers myself using USDA data and EPA data. And I actually came up with a higher number. I came up with 16 to 19%. And it's all the farmland that's used, because about 65% of our farmland is used to grow crops for animals. And it was just staggering to me. And that was what led me down my journey. So I started with Meatless Monday, and by beginning of 2017, I was fully vegan. And it's been a great transition. I've lost a ton of weight, not as much as you, but I've definitely lost a lot of weight. And it's been a great health benefit and health journey, as well as this whole how I feel about the environment and the climate.
Absolutely. And I would imagine doing what you do, you learn a little bit more every single day still, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I digest lots of podcasts, including yours, and all the documentaries and books. And it's Fiber Fueled. I know you talk to Will all the time, and I just absolutely love Fiber Fueled. That was an amazing book, and really led me. We had chosen to do a diversity of plants when we created Cool Beans, but that was more from the climate impact. We wanted to foster markets for all these other vegetables, not just monocultured crops. And ultimately, it turns out in Fiber Fueled, you find out, wow, that's a huge benefit for your gut as well. So that's great.
I'm curious, what was it that you noticed when you first started eating that plant-based diet yourself, and you go shopping, you're looking for something quick and easy to grab in the frozen food aisle? What were the things that you were picking up on at that time when you were first getting going with your Meatless Mondays?
Yeah. Well, I think that the first thing I learned, which was great, was it's much easier than you think. Everybody thinks, oh my God, going vegan, that's got to be brutal. And you do a Meatless Monday, then you do Vegan Monday, and you realize, holy cow, there's a lot of options, both in the grocery store and at restaurants. And so I found out it was easier than I thought. What was frustrating, though, was pretty quickly, and I was doing a lot of cooking on my own, but I wanted to have options that were available, convenient, already prepared. And I just couldn't find things in the grocery store that were whole food plant-based. And that's what really kind of led to the whole impetus of the idea was, I couldn't cook all the time, but, and I like Beyond Meat and I like Impossible, and you can't eat them every day. That's not a healthful way to eat. And so I was really trying to be whole food plant-based as much as possible. And I just couldn't do it in the grocery store is what I found without going to the produce aisle.
Did you suspect that there was a growing segment of the population out there who were feeling the exact same way that you were?
I definitely hope that was the case. I knew that the plant-based movement was growing, and the term whole food plant-based was definitely catching on within the plant-based movement. But there was also this whole idea that we've seen so many different industries kind of morph into cleaner ingredients, simpler ingredients, less processed. And I thought that the plant-based arena really needed that as well. And so we were hoping that it wouldn't just be plant-based eaters that wanted to eat whole food plant-based, but also the general public and flexitarians that would also want to do this 1 or 2 days a week to try to improve their diet as well.
And so the old saying, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, and thus the creation of Cool Beans. So for those who have not yet seen Cool Beans in their grocer's freezer, what exactly did you come up with?
Yeah, for sure. So I had started cooking myself, and I was wrapping these things and freezing them. And, that was iteration 1, if you will. And those were not very good products. But we ended up, when we founded the company, I was one of the seed funders. I was still working at another job. And so I couldn't run the company day to day, but we hired a food scientist, and we hired a group called Beyond Brands out of New York that basically ran the company and located the co-packers and whatnot. And we gave the food scientist some pretty easy direction. We basically said, look, we want this to be just food ingredients, veggie ingredients. So beans, veggies, whole grains, and spices. We don't want there to be mushy sauce. We don't want any fake meat. We don't want any fake cheese, none of that. We just want it to be the simple, actual ingredients from the earth. And go fix something and see what you can come up with. And she came up with the first batch, she came up with 9 different options. We tasted them and liked them, narrowed it down to 6. And from there, then refined them and narrowed down to 3. And that's what we launched with.
And I would imagine that was quite the challenge for food scientists. It's like, look, we want minimal ingredients, and the ingredients that we do want have to be, really, just from the earth. When you look at the majority of ingredients labels in the store, it's like it's as long as your arm is.
Yeah.
And so what was the food scientist's reaction when you issued this challenge?
Yeah, she's very good. Her name's Maggie Sadowski, and she's worked a lot in the plant-based space. And so she understood what we were going after. She understood what whole food plant-based was, even though she wasn't herself. I think the most difficult challenge, so she was up for the task and really liked the challenge. I think the most difficult part of it was we said no oil, or very, very minute amount of oil. And she actually was able to make the inside of the wrap with no oil, which is great. There's a little bit of oil in the wrap itself, because we also chose to do a gluten-free wrap, and there wasn't a good one on the market. So we kind of had to create our own with our co-packer. And that created some challenges. So we did have to have a little bit of oil to make it bind. But other than that, there's no oil in the product.
And it was about a week and a half ago that I got a knock at the door, and it was the postman, and he had some wonderful samples there for me. And my goodness gracious, my wife and I have really been enjoying the heck out of these things. And I need to say this. I am not being paid to endorse this. This is just
I'm really glad that you like them.
My honest opinion. They are absolutely fantastic. And because you focused on those clean, simple ingredients, to me, the flavor of these is absolutely out of this world and so critical. And I honestly believe that even if somebody has been eating that ultra processed diet for years, and they actually got an opportunity then to eat one of the Cool Beans wraps, that they would still say, man, this is tasty. This is what's up.
Yeah, we knew we were onto something when we first, the first show we went to, before we actually were even launched, we had samples, and we took them, and something like between 80 and 90% of everybody that tried them liked them. So we knew we were kind of onto something from a flavor perspective. But what's interesting is, I don't know if you've ever had Seth Goldman on the show. Great guy, and really love what he's done helping Beyond Meat get where they are. But he always tells a story about I don't remember what hurricane it was, but basically the whole store was cleaned out except for the plant-based space. And you could see all the products on the shelf. And the reason was because the really old products in the plant-based space didn't have a lot of flavor. But you and I cook for ourselves, right? And we've eaten plant-based. I eat so much more flavor since going plant-based. Why couldn't there be products that had flavor? And so that's really the angle we came at. We wanted to be very full of flavor. So I'm glad that you liked them.
Oh, they're fantastic. So let's talk about the ones that made the cut. Your three, you have Moroccan Gold, great tasting. You have Tikka Masala, which is another good, but my personal favorite was the spicy Chipotle, which you guys, you nailed this thing. It is so full of flavor. It's not even funny. And if you're used to eating wraps, you're used to eating burritos, you eat one of these things, it's going to blow virtually everything else that you've had before right out of the water.
Love that. Love to hear that. Yeah, there's a smokiness that I really love. We thought about calling it smoky Chipotle, but we thought we better put the spicy in there because they have a bite and they have a kick, and not everybody can handle it. But and then Tikka is kind of the second level of spice. It's very moderate, I think, if you like spice. And then Moroccan Gold is completely savory, no spice to it at all, no hot spiciness to it. But has kind of a sweet and savory flavor with the sweet potatoes, which I like.
Let's talk about the nutritional component of that. Obviously, still a growing space, the plant-based industry. And so a lot of people still just way unfamiliar with this. And they think, well, if you're not eating meat, you're not getting your protein. How much of that was on your mind, knowing that that myth was out there, that perception was going to be out there when you were creating this? So you know that when you look at that nutrition label, that it is clear as day that, yeah, these things pack a protein punch.
Yeah, for sure. We didn't go overboard. Like there's some companies out there that really manipulate to try to get a lot more extra protein in. And we just, you and I know that people eat 60% more protein than they actually need on average in the US. And so we were really much more focused on the fiber level. We wanted a high fiber level. And each of these wraps have 4 to 5 grams of fiber, which to us is critical. And it's critical to your health. And as Dr. Will talks about, it's critical for your gut health. So we were really cognizant of that, but we wanted a good protein component. So I think they have about 5 grams, so that's solid. The key is that they have 0 saturated fat. Actually, Tikka has a very little bit because of the coconut milk. But you're not, if you looked at some of the competitors and some of the other products that are kind of in that vegan junk food category, you're going to see 25 to 30% saturated fat. We don't do that.
No, and I think that you came at this with the right approach. I honestly think that this is something that people may want to turn to, even though you're not marketing this as being a weight loss product by any stretch of the imagination, but because it is lower in fat and the calories are just about right, and it's so full of fiber, you're still getting your protein. This is something that somebody should be eating if they are trying to, shed a few pounds and get healthier long-term, because this is something you can eat to lose weight and then keep right on eating it.
Yeah, absolutely. And beans in general are just a great weight loss. They take up, they crowd out a lot of other calories because they're so filling, and yet they've got all that great nutritional benefit that, people should be eating beans every day. And one of the interesting things is, so we negotiated, I talked about that diversity of plants, which we wanted in from the agriculture angle. But, Dr. Will Bolsowitz talks about you should try to eat 30 plants a week. Well, our 3 SKUs have 15 different plants in them. So you're getting 15 of those 30 right in those 3 wraps in a week. So that's another benefit, because that has health benefits for your gut that I wasn't even aware of when we made these products. But it turns out to be now core tenet to the new products that we're developing as well.
Oh, you spend any time with Dr. Bolsowitz, Will, and you will learn all about your gut health. He will school you up in a hurry. That man knows more about the gut than anybody I have ever met in my entire life. The other thing that I like about Cool Beans is that no shortage of carbs here either. Even though we live in a carb-phobic society, you didn't try to manipulate that at all and say, 0 carb wraps. No, you went for those healthy carbs. And so I think that that's another thing that's a big bonus here.
Yeah, I joke, and I even use it as a tagline, I think on my Twitter or Instagram, that I'm living a high carb life. And I think it's true. I mean, if you're eating good, healthy carbs, there's nothing wrong with carbs. Our body needs them. And so we weren't shying away from that. We were not pretending to be paleo or keto or anything like that. That's not us.
And when did Cool Beans first come on the market? Was that 28?
It was last year. So we've only been on the market for 1 year. In May of last year, we started landing on shelves. We actually launched in the first quarter, but COVID hit and kind of slowed things down. So
that is an interesting time to be doing a launch. Obviously, when you were planning that out, you couldn't have foreseen any of this coming. But nonetheless, how have things gone over the course of the year?
Well, I think we ended up with about 700 stores by the end of the year, and which was a little lighter than we wanted. I think we wanted to be in maybe 1,000 in that first year. But we're now in about 810. We're in Wegmans, we're in Sprouts, we're in Good Eggs and Deerbergs, a bunch of the really good, important regional chains. And its turns are going very well. So we're getting some power users that are buying the product, and it's moving off the shelves. So people are understanding the value proposition. We've primarily marketed at the beginning toward people that are plant-centric, but we're starting to expand that now to a broader audience because we think it could be very beneficial. Like you said, to flexitarians and people trying to lose weight, reducitarians, et cetera.
And this is just a hypothesis of mine, is that if there is a silver lining at all to the pandemic, is that it has forced all of us to take a much closer look at our own health and the role that our diets play in that. And I think that the natural conclusion that anybody would draw is that, hey, my diet has a lot of room for improvement from a business standpoint, because these products skew so much healthier than the majority of what's out there. I would think then that you would be well positioned for growth well into the future.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. There's some education that has to go on. We try not to diss our competitors. The plant-based space is a big universe, and we want everybody benefiting and whatnot. But we do believe that we have a healthier product. And, we're going to try to appeal to a wide audience. And I definitely see people moving toward plants, even if they're not going 100%. The trends are huge in that favor because people understand now it's a three-legged stool with the climate benefits, the health benefits, and the benefit to the animals and the environment.
One of the things, let's switch gears here for a second here. One of the things that I know that you like to talk about is the coming fourth wave of the plant-based movement. I did not realize that we were on wave number 4 already. What do you foresee for this fourth wave of the movement?
Yeah, and I wrote that article, and it was really what I was talking about. You kind of had the beginning was kind of in the 60s and 70s, although there certainly were plant-based eaters going back to Leonardo da Vinci, et cetera. But really that first big wave was the 60s and 70s. Then you kind of had a wave when I invested way back in the day in Boca Burger as a private equity investor. And we that wave was kind of a lot of people trying to just get a little bit healthier, eating plant-based some of the week. And that was kind of in the 90s. But then the real big third wave kind of has happened, as we've all known, over the last 10 years with the release of the China study and all the health benefits, and now the climate impacts that people learn about. But in this fourth wave, which is kind of similar to what you've seen in the grocery in general, you see a lot of people moving in the frozen aisle. People moved away from Stouffer's TV dinners to lean cuisine and to healthier. And then now it's moved to cleaner ingredient, Evol, and companies like that. I think you're going to see the same thing in plant-based, that now you get into the door, people come over to the plant-based world, they start eating it, they're healthier, they feel better, but now they want to kind of clean up, take some of that oil out of the mix, and want to start eating a simpler, minimally processed diet that would be closer to a whole food plant-based diet. So that's what we're hoping is the next trend.
And, I think that as somebody who's kind of in the plant-based community, it's so easy for me to think that this fourth wave is going to be the biggest yet. And then I try to step outside of this plant-based bubble and look at it more objectively. And you look at that market research and you talk about those numbers that I mentioned at the top, how it's going to become a $26 billion industry here within the next 5 years. you would have to think that this fourth wave, I mean, it's not just going to be a wave. This could be a full-blown tsunami.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think there is definitely a tsunami coming, and it's going to be moving people off of meat products to meat alternatives, whether they be plant-based or cell-based, and some of the other options, or fungi-based. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to see this healthy trend growing very dramatically alongside it. It won't be, I'm perfectly honest, and I mean, none of us think that the whole food plant-based is going to be as big as meat alternatives, because it's just going to be a huge sector. But I do believe it's going to be a very important wave that will kind of grow the whole industry together and to grow the healthy eaters within that as a much bigger subset.
And I think then if you look at this wave, the meat industry is going to be a little bit concerned. And so now you're starting to hear this chatter about something that's called regenerative agriculture. I'll ask you flat out, do you think then that will become the savior of the meat industry? Or is this wave, the plant-based fourth wave here, going to be so powerful that it's able to counter that?
Yeah, so it's interesting how regenerative became very polarizing. And it kind of, I'm a big believer in regenerative, but from a different perspective. In essence, what regenerative means is it's going back to agriculture the way it was done 300 years ago, when a farmer would plant 15 different crops on their land. They would have a few animals for the manure and to eat the bugs and different things around. The chickens would be eating aphids and things that might be dangerous for crops. But you were not doing factory farming, and frankly, some of those might not even be eaten or whatnot. But you need some level of manure or compost or something in for fertilizer, so that you're not using nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So I believe in regenerative agriculture. It just doesn't mean that you have to have millions and millions and millions of people eating mostly an animal-based diet. They're not mutually exclusive, and in fact, there is no way that we can eat. And I learned this as a private equity investor. We were looking, before I was plant-based, at a bison deal, and we looked at the company. We were interested in it, and they were, one of their biggest customers was one of the jerky companies that you would know the name of. I'm not going to say who it is, but and that company came to them and said, "How can we make you 10 times bigger than you are?" And this was the company that was growing the bison and then slaughtering them. And the guy said flat out, "There's no way I can be 10 times bigger, because there's not enough grassland to do it," because they were grass-fed. And that's really the thing. We can't, a lot of meat eaters talk about grass-fed beef being the alternative that's really going to change the game, but it's not feasible. There's just no way we can do it and feed the people the way they are. If you want to eat meat at the rate we're doing it, we have to do it in factory farms, and that's unhealthy. It's detrimental to the environment, and of course, it's terrible for climate.
And I think that there's also a growing number of people who are becoming aware of the consequences of just enormous animal agriculture and the effect that that's having on human health, the health of the environment, obviously the animals, the health of them as a whole. And I know that that's another thing that you're really keen on, is the harmony between human health and animal welfare here. And that's something that really plays also right into Cool Beans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny. A lot of people are coming to plant-based for either health or the climate. And once they get here and you spend, a year in it or whatever it takes, suddenly the animals become just as important as the other two legs of the stool, if you will. And it's important. It's a terrible way that we've made these animals live, and it's not right in so many ways.
And as we kind of wrap things up, I'm curious, as somebody who's in the food industry, what is your take on the way that what people call, and I think this is such a Frankenstein kind of a term, but lab grown meat. Like, how do you see that advancing in the consumer sector? Is this something that will become a viable alternative, or do you think that people are going to be kind of opposed to this Franken-science of a food and really try to gravitate toward those more natural, cleaner ingredients?
Well, I think it's in part going to be matter how it tastes. I think that's going to be a big element of it. I do think that it can be a solution to end some of the factory farming. And I think that there's different elements of it. In some cases, they're fermenting using fungi, and that may be actually fairly healthy. I don't know, but it all depends on what traits of the meat are still around and what the health benefits are. And for that, I'm going to have to rely on people like Dr. Bernard and Zach Bush and those folks to really tell us what is or isn't healthy.
Yeah, you and me both, my friend. You and me both. Final question for you. What has you most excited about the future of the plant-based industry?
Well, I think it's Generation Z. Those people are amazing. And what they're doing for climate awareness is outstanding. And then if you looked at the number of vegans had traditionally always been 1%. It's grown to 3% over the last 4 or 5 years. But amongst millennials, it's much higher, closer to 6%. And then Gen Z is even closer to 10%. And so I just look at that trend. You just look at the younger generation. They're going to lead the world, and they're definitely on board with this movement.
100%, my friend, 100%. And so I am excited that you are here today. I'm super excited that I still have a few more of those wraps in the freezer. I'm definitely going to go cash in on a spicy Chipotle here in just a little bit. I mean, it's so good, Tyler. It's so good.
I love it. It's awesome.
Well, thank you so very much for joining us, my friend. Best of luck to you in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chuck.
If you feel like you've raised your health IQ by a couple of points, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and leave a nice comment below. And to hear the entire interview, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your shows from and subscribe to The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. And please leave a 5-star rating.